You are lying flat on a stranger's rooftop in a city that has already decided you must die. And you can hear boots on the stairs. You do not move. You barely breathe. Stalks of drying flax are piled over your body, scratching your neck, filling your mouth with the dry, dusty smell of a harvest. Somewhere below you, the king's own men are standing in the doorway of this house, asking the woman who lives here a simple question. Where are the two foreigners? The two who came tonight? The two everyone in the city now knows are here to bring this place to the ground. If she points up the stairs, you're dead before sunrise. She does not point up the stairs. She lies. She tells the soldiers the men slipped out the gate at dusk, just before they shut it, and if they hurry, they can still catch them on the road. And the king's men turn and run into the dark, chasing two shadows that were never there, while the real shadows lie on the roof above their heads, hearts hammering, listening to the sound of their own deaths walking away. You will hear about this woman again before we are finished. You will hear what she asked for in return, and you will hear about a single length of scarlet cord, no thicker than your finger, that she tied in her window that night. A thread that will outlive this city, outlive this war, and end up woven into a family tree that nobody, not one person alive that night, could have imagined. But not yet, because here's the thing almost nobody tells you about the Bible. We talk about the armies, the walls of Jericho falling, the Red Sea splitting, Goliath dropping in the dust. We picture the loud moments, the daylight moments, the ones a painter would paint, and we miss the truth hiding underneath all of it. This is not a book about armies. This is not a book about kings on thrones. This is not a book about miracles in broad daylight. Again and again, the entire future of a nation, and as you will see, the future of far more than a nation, turns on a handful of frightened people moving in the dark, hiding on a rooftop, crawling into an enemy camp on their hands and knees, whispering poison into a usurper's ear, riding alone around a pile of rubble at midnight, telling no one why. The Bible is full of spies. The Hebrew word for what they did is tur, to scout, to search out, to slip into a place that wants you dead and come back alive with what you saw. There is a second word too, meraglim, which simply means the ones who go on foot, not the ones with chariots, not the ones with banners, the ones who go quietly on foot into the dark. And the stories of these people are some of the most dangerous, most desperate, most jaw-dropping accounts in all of Scripture. Most of them you have never heard preached. A few of them will change the way you read the famous stories you think you already know. So tonight, you're going to walk through every major secret mission in the Bible. You will meet the spies by name. You will stand with them in the camp of an enemy that outnumbers them 100 to 1. You will hide in a well with 2 messengers while soldiers thunder past inches away. And at the very end, you will follow one scarlet thread all the way down through 1,000 years of history into a manger. Stay with me. Because the first secret mission in the Bible did not save a nation. It destroyed one. It starts, like so many things, with fear. The people of Israel are camped on the edge of everything they have ever been promised. In front of them is the land, the actual land, the one God swore to Abraham, the one they have carried in their imaginations across a desert. And before they walk into it, Moses does something that sounds reasonable, sensible even. He sends in a scouting party first, 12 men, one leader from each of the 12 tribes, handpicked, trusted, the best of their people. Moses gives them a mission that is pure reconnaissance. Go up, see the land, count the cities. Are the people strong or weak, few or many? Is the soil rich or poor? And bring back fruit so the rest of us can see with our own eyes what we are walking into. The verb the text uses for what these men do is that word again, tur. Scout it out, search it. So 12 men slip across the border and disappear into a land that does not know they're there. For 40 days, they move through the hills, through the valleys, through the towns. They see the cities, and the cities are huge, with walls that scrape the sky. They see the people, and some of the people are enormous. And they see the fruit, a single cluster of grapes so heavy that 2 men have to carry it between them on a pole. Now picture the camp the night they come back. 2 million people, give or take, standing in the firelight, desperate for the report. 12 men walk out in front of them with that impossible cluster of grapes. And here is where the mission goes wrong. Not in the desert, not behind enemy lines. Right here in the safety of their own camp, in front of their own families. 10 of the 12 spies look at that crowd and they tell the truth about the fruit, and then they lie about everything that matters. The land is good, they say, but, and it is always the but that kills you, but the people are giants, but the cities are fortresses. But we cannot do this. We saw the sons of Anak, the giant clans, and next to them, listen to the exact phrase they use. Next to them, we looked like grasshoppers. We were grasshoppers in our own eyes, and so we must have been grasshoppers in theirs. Here's what most people miss about that line. They were not describing the giants. They were describing themselves. They had already shrunk. They had measured themselves against the problem instead of measuring the problem against their God. And the moment you do that, you are already a grasshopper, and you have not even been stepped on yet. 2 men try to stop the bleeding. Caleb from the tribe of Judah steps forward and tries to quiet the crowd. We should go up at once, he says, and take it, for we are well able. And standing beside him is a younger man, an assistant to Moses, a man whose name you already know, even if you do not realize it yet. His name is Joshua. Remember him. He is going to come back into this story in a way you will not expect. But 2 voices cannot outshout 10. The fear catches like fire in dry grass. By morning, the entire nation is weeping, wishing they had died in Egypt, talking about choosing a new leader to take them back to slavery, back to the whips, back to the mud pits, anything but the giants. And God's response is one of the heaviest sentences in the entire Bible. You want to know what the land is like for 40 days? He says, in effect, then you will wander in this wilderness for 40 years. 1 year for every day the spies were gone. An entire generation, everyone who stood in that camp and chose fear, will die out here in the sand. Their children will inherit the promise, but they will not see it. Think about the weight of that. 10 frightened men gave 1 bad report, and it cost a nation 40 years and an entire generation of graves. Of the 12 who went in, Only 2 ever set foot in the promised land: Caleb and Joshua. This is not a small thing. This is the Bible telling you right at the start exactly how high the stakes are when you send people into the dark to find out the truth. A spy's report can build a future or bury one. The information itself is a weapon, and the men who carry it back are holding the fate of everyone they love in their trembling hands. Hold that thought. Because 40 years later, that younger man, Joshua, is now old. Moses is dead, and Joshua is the one in charge. He is the one standing on the edge of the land, about to do the thing his entire generation failed to do, and the very first thing he does is send in spies. Now sit with that for a second. Joshua, of all people, knows how this can go wrong. He watched it go wrong. He watched 10 cowards talk a nation into the grave. He has spent 40 years burying the men who refused to trust the report he himself brought back. If anyone in history had a reason to never send another spy as long as he lived, it is this man. And he sends 2 anyway. Quietly this time. Not 12. Leaders in front of the whole camp where fear can spread. 2 men in secret cross the river. Look at the land, and especially look at Jericho, which brings you back to that rooftop. The 2 spies cross the Jordan and walk straight into the most fortified city in their path, Jericho. And they do not camp outside the walls to take notes from a safe distance. They go in, through the gate, into the streets, into the one place a foreign man can rent a room without too many questions. The house of a woman named Rahab. The Bible calls Rahab a prostitute. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing his history of these events centuries later, tries to clean it up a little and calls her an innkeeper. The truth is probably that her house was both a place on the edge of respectable society, built right into the city wall, where strangers came and went, and nobody asked their business, which is exactly why 2 spies would choose it, and exactly why it nearly got them killed. Because in a walled city, strangers get noticed. Word reaches the king of Jericho that night. Foreign men came in at dusk, holed up in Rahab's house, almost certainly here to spy out the land. The king sends soldiers, and now everything, the conquest, the promise, 40 years of waiting, hangs on the nerve of a woman the holy men of Israel would have crossed the street to avoid. She hides them. Up on the roof, under the drying flax, in the scene you started this story inside. She faces down the king's men at her own door and lies to their faces. And when they are gone, chasing ghosts down the Jericho road, she climbs up to the roof to talk to the 2 terrified men she's just saved. And what she says will knock the wind out of you. I know, she tells them. I know your God dried up the Red Sea for you. I know what you did to the kings on the other side of the river. Everyone in this city knows. And the moment we heard it, our hearts melted and there was no courage left in any of us. Then she says it plainly. Your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. Stop and feel the size of that. A pagan woman in a doomed pagan city with no Bible, no prophet, no covenant, no reason on earth to believe, has more faith than 10 princes of Israel did standing in their own camp, looking at the same evidence. The princes saw the miracles and chose fear. Rahab heard a rumor of the miracles and chose God. She bet her life and the lives of her whole family on a God who, as far as her city was concerned, was coming to destroy her. So she asks for one thing. When you come back to take this city, and you will, remember me. Spare my father, my mother, my brothers, my sisters. Save my family. And the spies give her a sign, a signal, a way for the invading army to know which house to leave, standing in a city marked for total destruction. Tie a length of scarlet cord in your window, they tell her. Gather everyone you love inside these walls. And when we come, the red in the window will tell us, not this house. This house lives. Here is the Hebrew word for that cord, tikva. It means a cord, a line, a rope. It is also in nearly every other place it appears in the Bible the word for hope. Remember that. We are coming back to it, and when we do, it is going to mean far more than you can see right now. Rahab lowers the spies down the outside of the wall on a rope through her window. Her house was built into the wall itself, so her window opened onto the world outside the city. They tell her to hide in the hills for 3 days until the search dies down. They make it back to Joshua. And this time, the report is everything the first one should have been. The Lord has given the whole land into our hands. The people are melting with fear before us. 2 spies. 1 frightened, faithful woman. And the conquest of the promised land begins not with a sword, but with a lie told to save 2 strangers and a red thread tied in a window. If this is already hitting you, do me one favor before we go deeper, because the next missions get darker and stranger, and the people in them are not all heroes. Take 1 second and subscribe, and leave a single word in the comments. Just the word Rahab, so I know you're still here on the roof with me. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who love these stories. Now, let's go back into the dark, because not every secret mission in the Bible has a hero in it. There is one you have almost certainly never heard, buried in the book of Judges, and it is one of the bleakest spy stories in all of Scripture. The tribe of Dan has no land of its own. They are squeezed out, restless, looking for somewhere to call home. So they do the familiar thing. They send out scouts, 5 armed men told to go and search out the land. There is that word tur again, and find somewhere worth taking. The 5 Danites travel north until they come to a place called Laish. And what they find there is not a fortress, it is the opposite. Laish is a quiet town of peaceful people, living securely far from anyone who might trouble them, with no warning system and no allies, and no idea that 5 sets of foreign eyes are measuring their walls and counting their gates. The scouts go home, and here's what they report. We have seen the land, and it is very good. The people are secure. They suspect nothing. Do not hesitate. Get up and go, for God has given it into your hand. Now hold that report up next to Rahab's story, because they are photographic negatives of each other. At Jericho, spies found a fortified city ready to fight, and a woman of faith inside it, and the result was mercy for those who turned to God. At Laish, spies found a defenseless town of innocent people, and the result was a massacre. 600 armed men of Dan marched north and put the peaceful people of Laish to the sword and burned their town and rebuild it for themselves. And then, this is the part that should chill you. They set up a stolen idol in a corrupt priesthood, and they worship it there for generations. Here's the part nobody tells you. The Bible does not flinch from this. It does not pretend the spies were noble. It records, plainly and without applause, that the same kind of mission that saved Rahab's family was used by Dan to destroy a town that had done nothing to anyone. A spy mission is a tool, and a tool in the hands of the faithful and a tool in the hands of the faithless do very different work in the world. The story of Laish is the Bible holding up a mirror and asking you a hard question. When you have power over people who never saw you coming, what do you do with it? Let that sit, and then let's go somewhere the odds are so absurd you will want to laugh. It is the middle of the night, and a man named Gideon is about to sneak into an enemy camp so large that the Bible says the soldiers were as thick as locusts, and their camels could not be counted, like sand on the seashore. Gideon has 300 men. 300 against an army of well over 100,000. He has already watched God whittle his forces down from 32,000 to 300 on purpose so that nobody could ever say Israel saved itself. And now Gideon is standing in the dark, staring down at a valley full of enemy campfires stretching to the horizon, and his courage is failing. So God tells him to do something almost no commander would ever do. Go down into the enemy camp tonight and listen. But God, gentle in a way that should undo you, adds a single sentence. If you are afraid to go down alone, take your servant Purah with you. There it is. The smallest, most human detail. The Almighty knows this terrified man cannot make himself crawl into a sea of enemies by himself. So God does not shame him for it. He just says, take a friend. Bring Purah. So the two of them creep down the hillside in the dark. Two men slipping between the tents of an army that would tear them apart in an instant if a single camel stirred. And they stop, close enough to hear voices, and they listen. And what they overhear is one enemy soldier waking from a nightmare, telling another. I had a dream, the man says. A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into our camp, and it struck a tent, and the tent collapsed flat. And his friend, pale in the dark, answers him, that is nothing less than the sword of Gideon. God has given our whole army into his hand. Now watch what happens inside Gideon. He came down that hill to spy out an army. He came down to count campfires. And instead, God let him overhear his own enemies, confessing in the dark, in their own dreams, that they were already beaten. The fearful man who needed a friend just to walk down a hill, that man worships right there in the enemy camp, on his knees in the dirt between the tents. And then he climbs back up the hill a different man, and with 300 torches and 300 trumpets and a shout in the night, he routs an army of more than 100,000 without his men drawing a single sword in the first wave. That is what a spy mission can do, not just gather facts. Sometimes God sends you into the dark not to find out the enemy's strength, but to discover in their own trembling voices your strength that you could not see in yourself. But here's a question. What do you do when the enemy you are spying on is being spied on by someone they cannot see? Because there is a war story buried in the book of 2 Kings that is, when you look at it plainly, the strangest intelligence operation in the entire Bible. The king of Aram is at war with Israel, and he is a careful man. He holds secret councils with his commanders. He plans his ambushes in private. In such and such a place, he says, we will lay our trap. Send the raiding party there. And every single time, before his soldiers can spring it, the king of Israel mysteriously avoids the exact spot. Not once, not twice. Again and again, as if Israel's king can read the Aramean king's own mind. Put yourself in that war room. You have planned in total secrecy. Only your most trusted officers were in the room, and the enemy keeps sidestepping your traps, as though someone is reading your private war plans aloud to him the moment you speak them. What is the only explanation that makes sense? A traitor, a mole. Someone in this room is selling me out. The king of Aram explodes. He gathers his officers and demands to know which of them is the spy, which of them is secretly on the side of the king of Israel. And one of his servants says something that must have made the hair stand up on every neck in the room. None of us, my lord. There is no traitor here. It is Elisha. Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, he tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom. Sit with how chilling that is. The enemy's most private words, spoken in the dark of his own bedchamber, were being heard. Not by a man with his ear to the wall, by a prophet a day's journey away, to whom God simply handed the enemy's secrets like a folded note. There was no leak. There was no informant. There was only a God who sits in on every secret council ever held, in every war room on earth, and misses nothing. So the king of Aram does the only thing a furious man can do. If the leak is one prophet, then take out the prophet. He sends an entire army, horses, chariots, a great force, by night, to surround one small town called Dothan and capture a single unarmed old man. And in the morning, Elisha's young servant steps outside and sees it, the whole horizon bristling with the enemy, an army for one prophet, and the servant does what you or I would do. He panics. Oh no, my master, what are we going to do? We are surrounded. We are finished. And Elisha says the most quietly outrageous thing, do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. The servant must have thought the old man had lost his mind. More than them? Master, there is no one with us. It is you and me and an army at the gate. And Elisha prays one sentence, Lord, open his eyes that he may see. And God opens the young man's eyes. And the hills around Dothan, the same hills that a moment ago held nothing but an enemy army, are revealed to be full of horses and chariots of fire, a blazing host of heaven encircling the prophet on every side. The enemy had surrounded Elisha, and all the while, unseen, heaven had surrounded the enemy. Here's the part that should undo you. The servant was never in danger, not for 1 second. The protection was there the entire time. The only thing that changed was that he could finally see it. And how many mornings have you stepped outside and counted the army at your gate, and never once thought to count the fire on the hills? Then Elisha does something no spy story you have ever heard does. He prays that the enemy army be struck blind, and they are, and he walks out and leads the entire blinded host by the hand straight into the capital city of Israel, into the trap of their own making. And when their eyes are opened and they realize they are surrounded and helpless, the king of Israel licks his lips and asks, "Shall I kill them? Shall I kill them?" And Elisha says, "No. You did not capture these men with your sword. You will not kill them. Feed them. Set bread and water before them, and send them home to their master." And so the most dangerous army in the region is marched in blind, given a feast, and sent home alive. And the raids on Israel stopped. Mercy did what the sword never could. That is the highest form of intelligence in the entire Bible. Not a man hiding on a roof, not a runner in a well, a God who hears every word spoken in every locked room, who has already encircled the army that thinks it has you surrounded, and whose final move, when he has his enemy completely helpless, is to set a table. We are well past the halfway mark now, and the missions are about to turn personal and political in the worst way, because the next spy is not creeping through an enemy camp. He is sitting at the right hand of a king who wants his own master dead. This is the story of the most sophisticated piece of espionage in the entire Old Testament, and almost nobody knows it is even there. King David's own son, Absalom, has launched a coup. He has spent years quietly stealing the hearts of the people, and now he marches on Jerusalem with an army, and David, the giant killer, the warrior, the king, does the unthinkable. He runs. He flees his own capital barefoot and weeping up the Mount of Olives, an old man fleeing his own child. And David's greatest fear is not the army behind him. It is a single man, a counselor named Ahithophel. Ahithophel is the smartest political mind in the kingdom, and he has just defected to Absalom. The Bible says his advice was treated as if a man had inquired of God himself. That is how good he was. And David knows that if Ahithophel's strategy is followed, David is a dead man. He prays one desperate prayer as he climbs the hill. "Lord, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness." And then he does something about his own prayer. He plants a spy. At the top of the hill, David meets his old friend Hushai the Architect, loyal and heartbroken, ready to follow David into exile. And David stops him. "No. I need you for something else. Go back. Go back to Jerusalem. Go to Absalom and tell him you serve him now. Get inside. And from the inside, destroy the counsel of Ahithophel. Be my man in the enemy's war room." So Hushai walks back into the captured city and looks the usurper in the eye and lies with his whole life. "Long live the king," he tells Absalom. And Absalom, flattered, lets him in. And now there are two voices in Absalom's ear. Ahithophel, the genius, who tells Absalom the truth. Move now, tonight, while David is exhausted and unguarded. Take 12,000 men and strike before he can regroup, and you will win. It is exactly right. It would work. And Hushai, the spy, who stands up and spins a beautiful, patient, flattering, completely false strategy. "Wait," he says. "David is a hardened warrior. He and his men are like a bear robbed of her cubs. They will be hidden. You will be humiliated if you rush. No, gather all Israel first, from Dan to Beersheba, a great host, and lead them yourself in glory. Wait." It is a lie designed to do one thing: buy David time. And it is dripping with the one thing Absalom cannot resist: the picture of himself at the head of a vast army, covered in glory. Absalom takes the bad advice. And the Bible tells you exactly why, in a line that should raise the hair on your neck. The Lord had ordained to defeat the good counsel of Ahithophel, so that the Lord might bring harm upon Absalom. David's prayer on the hill and David's spy in the city are the same answer to the same request. God works through the planted agent, but the mission is not over, because Hushai's counter-counsel is useless unless David hears about it in time to escape across the Jordan that very night. And here's where the story becomes pure, white-knuckle spycraft. Hushai gets the message to two priests still loyal to David inside the city. The priests have two sons, Jonathan and Ahimaaz, waiting in secret just outside the walls, ready to run the message to the king. A servant girl carries the word out to them. The two young men take off running toward the Jordan with David's life in their mouths. And they are spotted. A boy sees them and runs to tell Absalom. Riders are sent. Now there are two messengers sprinting through the countryside with armed pursuers closing behind, and if they are caught, David dies and the rebellion wins, and the whole story of Israel bends in a direction God said it would not go. They reach a town called Bahurim, and they duck into the courtyard of a man whose wife does the bravest, quickest thinking thing. There is a well in the courtyard. The two men climb down into it, and the woman pulls a cloth over the mouth of the well and scatters grain across it to dry in the sun, so that it looks like nothing, just an ordinary courtyard on an ordinary morning. The pursuers arrive. "Where are the men?" they demand. And she points down the road and says, "Oh, they crossed the brook already. They went that way." And the soldiers ride off, chasing two shadows that are not there, while the real men crouch in the cold dark at the bottom of a well, listening to hoofbeats fade. Do you hear it? Do you hear the echo? A frightened messenger hidden by a quick-thinking woman who lies to armed men at her own home and sends them running the wrong way? We have been here before. We were here on a rooftop in Jericho with flax and a scarlet cord. The Bible is showing you the same scene twice, centuries apart, because it wants you to notice the pattern. The whole future keeps coming down to one ordinary person, usually a woman the history books would have ignored, deciding in a single terrifying moment to hide the right people and lie to the wrong ones. Jonathan and Ahimaaz climb out of the well, run through the night and reach David. Cross the Jordan, they gasp. Cross tonight. Ahithophel's plan was to hit you now. By dawn, every last person with David is across the river and safe. And Ahithophel, the genius, the man whose advice was like the voice of God, Ahithophel watches his perfect strategy get rejected for Hushai's flattery, and he understands instantly what it means. He has lost. The coup is going to fail. So he saddles his donkey, rides home to his own city, sets his house in order, and hangs himself. The smartest man in the kingdom, undone not by an army, but by a single planted spy and a lie told in a war room. That is the cost and the power of one man on the inside. Now, before the last act, and the last act is where every thread you have been holding gets pulled tight, let me ask you to do one more thing. If these stories are landing, share this video with one person who loves the Bible but has never heard half of what you have heard tonight. Send it to them right now, before the ending, because the ending is the part you will want to talk about. and subscribe if you have not, because there are dozens more of these hidden stories waiting. Okay, the walls are about to come back, and so is the cord. Centuries pass. The kingdom David fought for is long gone. Jerusalem has been burned, its walls torn down, its people dragged into exile in Babylon. And in the palace of a foreign empire, a Jewish man named Nehemiah is serving wine to a king, carrying in his chest a grief he cannot show on his face, because his city, the city of God, is lying in ruins 1,000 miles away. The king lets him go home, and when Nehemiah finally reaches Jerusalem, he does not call a meeting, he does not announce his plans, he does not even tell the local officials why he has come. Instead, 3 nights after he arrives, he gets up in the dark, takes only a few men, tells no one what God has put in his heart to do, and rides out alone to spy on his own city. By night, by himself, Nehemiah inspects the broken walls. He rides along the rubble, past the burned gates, examining every collapsed section, every gap, measuring the impossible scope of the work in the dark, where no enemy and no discouraged friend can see his face. The officials did not know where he had gone or what he was doing. He scouted the ruins like a spy casing a target, except the target was his own home, and the enemy he was hiding from was as much the despair of his own people as the swords of his foes. And only after he has seen it all with his own eyes, only after he knows the true size of the disaster, does he stand up in front of the people and say, "Come, let us rebuild the wall, that we may no longer be a disgrace." And they answer, "Let us rise up and build." There is something quietly devastating about Nehemiah's midnight ride. Every other spy in this story went into a foreign place. Nehemiah went into the wreckage of the thing he loved most, alone in the dark, to count the cost before he asked anyone else to pay it. Sometimes the bravest reconnaissance you will ever do is not into enemy territory. It is into the ruins of your own life by night, where nobody can watch you measure the damage, before you find the courage to say out loud, "We will build this back." And that brings us at last to the greatest spy master the world has ever seen. You do not think of Jesus this way. Nobody does. But look closely at the final week of his life, and you will see a man running covert operations with the precision of a master of secrets. When he needs a donkey to ride into Jerusalem, he does not simply send for one. He gives 2 disciples a coded set of instructions. Go into the village. You will find a colt tied, one that no one has ever ridden. Untie it. And if anyone asks what you're doing, here's the passphrase. Say, "The Lord has need of it," and they will let you take it. It is a prearranged signal between Jesus and an unnamed friend, a recognition code, exactly like an agent and a handler. And when he needs a secret place to eat the Passover, a meal he knows the authorities are hunting him to prevent, he is even more careful. He tells 2 disciples, "Go into the city, and you will be met by a man carrying a jar of water. Follow him. Stop and think about why that sign works." In that culture, carrying water was women's work. A grown man carrying a water jar through the streets would stand out the way a single red umbrella stands out in a gray crowd. It is a perfect signal, invisible to everyone except the 2 men who have been told exactly what to look for. Follow that man, Jesus says, into a house, and there will be a large upper room already prepared. He has arranged the safe house in advance through a contact using a sign no informant could decode, so that Judas, the betrayer already inside his own circle, could not tell the authorities where to find him until the meal was finished and the work was done. The Son of God spent his last free hours moving like a spy through a city that wanted him dead. Coded phrases, prearranged signals, a safe house, a meal protected from the one traitor at his own table. He who could have called 12 legions of angels chose, in his final week, to work in the quiet, careful way of all the secret agents who came before him. And now we pull the thread, go all the way back to the beginning, back to the rooftop, back to the flax and the boots on the stairs, and a frightened woman named Rahab, tying a scarlet cord in her window so that an invading army would know to spare her house. Remember the Hebrew word for that cord? Tikva, the word that also means hope. A thread of hope hanging from the window of a condemned woman in a condemned city. Here is what no one told you that night, and what Rahab herself could not have known. Jericho fell. The walls came down, and in the middle of the destruction, one house was left standing. The house with the red cord and the window, and Rahab and her whole family walked out alive, the only survivors of an entire city, saved by a thread. But that is not the end of her thread. It is the beginning of it. Rahab, the foreigner, the prostitute, the enemy, the woman the holy men would not have touched, did not just survive. She joined Israel. She married a man named Salmon, and she had a son named Boaz. And if you know your Bible, your breath should be catching right now, because Boaz married a foreign widow named Ruth. And Ruth and Boaz had a son named Obed. And Obed had a son named Jesse. And Jesse had a son, the youngest, the shepherd, the one nobody bothered to call in from the fields, named David. The same David who fled Jerusalem and planted a spy in his enemy's war room. He is Rahab's great-great-grandson. And the thread does not stop at David. Open the very first page of the New Testament, the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the line of the Messiah traced back through the generations. And there, written into the bloodline of the Savior of the world, in black and white, is the name of a Canaanite prostitute who once hid 2 terrified spies under a pile of flax and tied a scarlet thread in her window. Rahab is in the family tree of Jesus. Do you see it now? The scarlet cord, the tikva, the thread of hope, was never just a signal to an army. It was a thread God was pulling through history. A single blood-red line that ran from a window in a doomed city down through 1,000 years, straight into the manger in Bethlehem, the most desperate, most secret, most unlikely mission in the Bible. 2 frightened men hiding from death on a rooftop did not just save a woman. It carried a thread that would one day be woven into the salvation of the entire world. And maybe tonight you needed to hear exactly that. Maybe you feel like Rahab on that roof, on the wrong side of the wall in a life that feels condemned, with nothing in your hands but one thin thread hanging on by a single scarlet cord of hope when everything else has come down around you. Hear this. In God's hands, that thread is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of a line you cannot yet see. He has built entire futures, He has built the family of his own son out of one person who chose faith over fear and tied a red thread in a window when the walls were already falling. That is what these spies have been telling you all along. The loud things, the armies and the walls and the kings are not where the future is decided. The future is decided in the dark by frightened people holding a thread. So let me leave you with 3 things to carry out of here tonight. First, this. The fate of nations in the Bible turns again and again on secret missions and ordinary people. The 12 spies, the 2 at Jericho, Gideon and Purah in the camp, Hushai in the war room, the runners in the well, Nehemiah on the wall, even Jesus in his final week. The Bible is not only a book of loud miracles, it is a book of quiet, dangerous faithfulness in the dark. Second, this is for you. The 10 spies measured themselves against the giants and called themselves grasshoppers, and it cost a nation 40 years. Caleb and Rahab and Gideon measured the giants against God, and the walls came down. The size of your obstacle has never been the question. The only question has ever been which size you choose to look at first. And third, the one I most want you to take with you. You may be holding nothing right now but a single thread. A thread of hope so thin you can barely feel it, in a life that feels like a city already marked for destruction. But that scarlet cord in Rahab's window was the same word as hope, and God ran it down through 1,000 years until it touched the cradle of his own son. He has not forgotten the thread in your hand. He is still pulling it towards something you cannot yet see. So tell me down in the comments, which of these secret missions hit you the hardest tonight? Was it the 2 on the rooftop, the men in the well, the king's son hanging from his own pride, or Nehemiah alone in the ruins? I read every one, and I want to know where this landed for you, because here is the last secret, the one underneath all of them. Every spy in this book was sent into the dark to bring back the truth. And the truth they kept finding, mission after mission, century after century, was the same. God was already there. In the enemy camp, in the war room, in the well, in the ruins, on the rooftop with the flax and the cord. He was always there in the dark first. And he is there in yours